Raf, thank you for coming back to the show. Now, last time we talked, it was like a couple months ago, and
Yeah,
this
yeah,
was, when everything was seemingly normal and not spinning out of control.
right.
Before we jump into things, how's your family dealing with COVID-19, and how have you been personally impacted by all this?
Uh, well, my dad has an compromised immune system, so he's been isolated 100%.
Wow.
Um, yeah. Um, my younger sister has autism, so basically all her caregivers haven't been able to come by all the time.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
and with the cuts to Medicaid and Medicare and all that,
Hmm.
there's no budget for it. So, so basically, my mom had to quit her job. Long story short, um,
Wow.
to take care of that. And then I also I'm also an essential employee. It's my day job. So, you might have heard of a little company called Costco.
Uh huh.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
God. So
yeah.
you're like at the
I'm
heart of where everyone's going.
right, exactly. So, yeah. But other than that, I'm okay. Uh, and I say I'm okay. Like I have a gun to my head, but it is what it is.
It's like it's a comparatively okay kind of thing, It's like everything
Yeah.
is just so bad. You're just like, well, I mean, I guess it literally could be worse.
Yeah, and thankfully, the majority of people, I live in the Atlanta area, so the majority of people I've talked to, including customers and stuff like that, have been super chill. They've all been super nice. There are even people
Hmm.
going up to me and saying, "Thank you so much for working right now," and all that.
Wow.
And then there's the occasional person who's like, "You're the one who brought COVID over here, you son of a bitch," and
Are you serious? This has someone said that to you at work?
Uh, in a roundabout way, yes. And
Oh.
then there's also other people because of recent mask policy where we can only have we only allow people in with a mask on.
Uh
It doesn't matter if they're employee or not.
huh.
And we've had to cancel several memberships over it because with
Thrills.
yeah, because people are like, "Oh shit, I don't want to wear a mask. You're taking away my freedoms." It's like we're a private it's like we're a private company. We have
Yeah.
freedoms too.
Yeah.
And then if they raise a stink about it, we just cancel their membership with no refund.
Damn. I
Yeah.
mean, to be honest, I agree with it too. I mean, like, if you're gonna enact this policy, especially at a place where people are getting groceries and essential items, it's like this isn't a time to dick around. Like, I don't really
Yeah.
care if you're like into this whole like my freedoms shit. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, exactly. So it is what it is. I work part of the sales floor, so it's basic. So essentially, I'm one of the people who decides where things go and how things are set up and make sure everything is stocked and ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also deal with how the store is laid out and planning because we change the layout almost every single day. So yeah.
Really? What the hell? I
Well,
didn't know that Costco does a.
yeah, nothing is labeled. No, there are no aisles that are labeled. They only have numbers. So
Oh yeah, that's
basically,
true.
when you walk in, the first line of stuff you see walking in,
Yeah.
that is subject to change daily depending on what our stock is and how well it's doing. So
Ah.
I'm one of those people that looks at the sales and I'm like, okay, this is doing well. We'll probably put it here so we can do better. This
Yeah.
one's not
Yeah.
selling well, so I switch. And yeah, so I'm that guy.
Damn. Are you guys doing the like the one way aisles kind of thing?
In some aisles, I actually part of our planning was actually reducing the number of things toward the end of the aisles on our end caps. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
didn't mean to bop my mic. Uh, so basically, we're widening the aisles so more people have more space to walk, and then in the more enclosed spaces like the dairy coolers or vegetable coolers, we actually have like one-way arrows, and we have somebody standing at the front, an employee saying, "Okay, you're going the wrong way. Please stop." So yeah, and
Damn.
talk to people like their children and tell people not to run first thing. When we first open, we have to tell people to not run to get toilet paper, like
Oh gosh,
preschoolers.
and it's all the way in the back too.
Well, this is actually one of my coworkers' ideas. He
Oh.
decided to move all the essential items like toilet paper, paper towels, all that
Uh huh.
into our main aisle where people walk by. So after you turn the first corner, everything is there, so you could visibly see it. So not no, so nobody has to rush
Oh.
to the back.
Oh,
So
I like that. I like that.
and then on top of that, nobody's going to be crowding the back either, so it avoids crowds too. So yeah,
Wow.
I don't know who thought about it, but they are genius. So
Shit,
yeah.
man. Well, hopefully you're safe out there. And obviously, I could go into this, but I want to go ahead and get into the meat of this.
Mhm.
When we last spoke, we discussed one of the projects that you were working on, which is your
Yep.
podcast, Gaming with R and R, and then
Mhm.
we also touched base on your background and experience in voice acting. But today we're sort of getting a full crash course on all things related to voice acting, which I love because I know that there are a lot of folks who are in our community who have either thought about voice acting as a career or have or some of them have no idea that this career actually exists.
Yes.
So for starters, like let's go basic. Can you give us sort of a snapshot of what a day one super entry level voice actor schedule or workload or their what their pay might look like versus someone who's more seasoned? Because I'd like to give the audience sort of a range. Like obviously this is totally subject to obviously if you're talking about celebrities and whatnot, but just on average, what would you say is the range?
Okay, so one big misconception about voice acting is that only 5% of it is about radio and very popular shit. So,
Mm-hmm.
when you think cartoons, you think radio, you think voice acting.
Mm-hmm.
That's only 5% of the jobs. The majority of the
Mm.
jobs are actually narration. What does that mean? So basically, that would be um, video games, character work, telephony. Basically when you call a number, they're like, "Hi, thank you for calling this doctor's
Oh
office.
yeah,
Press
yeah,
one
yeah,
for administration."
yeah.
Yeah, they hire voice actors for that.
Hmm.
Um, Audiobooks, commercials, museum tours, ADR, which is basically anime dubbing. They have to match lip flaps while voice acting, which is really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
E-learning, all those things are hired or for people who voice act. And depending on which you specialize in or finding your niche, as we call it,
Mm-hmm.
it could really range from one thing to another. And starting out day one, usually people they do one of two things. They either are like me, buy a bunch of equipment, soundproof their walls, and hope for the best and just jump into it and start auditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Or they get some education and stuff like that, which I kind of honestly hope I did first, or wished I did first. But, um, uh, but it's also the kind of job that there's just like other acting jobs and stuff like that. Sometimes you're going to be auditioning a lot and you won't be getting a lot of pay out of it, but you're getting a lot of practice. So
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I know I didn't get my first paid job for at least a month and a half, just because um, I sent out about 100 auditions. I got hired for 5, and
What?
then and only one of those was paid. And then it ended up getting canceled, but I got paid anyway.
Oh
So
shit.
it's one of those things you have to basically you get for every hour of work, you might get 1 minute of pay, but once you get paid, it actually is worth it because it's one of those art forms that's actually good. And that's why when I say majority of voiceover work is in narration, that's actually where the money is. Narration. Um,
Okay.
yeah, because if you're planning on doing cartoons, animation, like YouTube narration, that sort of thing, whiteboard videos, for one, are very popular. As so those,
Explainer,
yeah,
infographics.
yeah, those explainer videos that everybody has probably heard at some point,
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it it's one of those things that you just have to either really really like it or just um you know have a certain sense of how to go about things, because if you just jump in without knowing what you're doing, one, you're going to waste a lot of money. Two, you're going to
Yeah.
waste a lot of time. Three, it's very frustrating, especially when you don't have any idea of where to go, what to do, and also what to expect in terms of payment.
Yeah.
um yeah, but with, for example, if you decided to do telephony, which for a lot of people, if you're calling a company and let's say it's a spa, you call, it's like, "Hello, welcome to so and so spa, press 1 for blah blah blah." That
Mm-hmm.
is one if somebody is calling, that is their absolute first impression of that business.
Mm-hmm.
If you mess it up, it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
So that's why they hire voice actors for that. um
Yeah, that's true. I actually do notice, when you, especially when you call companies and they have like a very professional like sounding voice, and then you go to the company, because I used to work in marketing, and you'd you know, call these companies and there'd be the secretary, but then you go in person and like, that doesn't sound like anybody there, and that's probably usually voice actor.
Right.
So like when you're talking about like the 100 submissions that you made and you got, you know, callbacks from like 5 of them, was that within the span of a month? And like, how long does it take to audition? Like, is it a process of like a whole day's worth? Because like 100, that's insane.
It was a lot, and I did it all in my spare time. So basically, it really depends. Because what I did first, which I honestly think is a mistake, don't do what I did. I went on to like one of those free amateur sites where you could basically audition for whatever you want for amateur projects.
Mhm.
Some of them are paid, some of them are fan projects, some of them are unpaid, etc., etc.
Mhm.
And you can just shotgun auditions the moment right out the gate.
Wow. Okay.
And yeah, which it's great if you want to start getting you know, experience and whatnot, because every audition and every script read actually builds toward your repertoire and practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of rough because when it comes to auditions, it's not about getting rejected, it's about getting selected. That is a very key difference, because if you're not selected, you didn't get rejected because somebody else happened to be a better fit for it. And
Mhm.
even if your audition might have been technically better, like you're a better actor,
Mhm.
like let's say there was an animation going on where, you know, it's like a funny YouTube video or
Mhm.
a Minecraft skit or something like that.
Mhm.
Your voice, your acting skills might be better than another person's audition. However, if your voice doesn't fit the character according to that director, they might not choose you.
Yeah, so it's at the end of the day, it's like you can have all the technical aspects, but it's such a creative decision that it could just be a matter of like, oh, you know, you didn't really embody that character as much as this other person.
Exactly. And I mostly tried to do fun projects in order to, you know, try to get paid and whatnot, which now I'm not. I'm not doing all fun projects, but
Mhm.
I do have some. I'm major bleh, bleh, bleh. I'm mostly I mostly specialize right now in audiobooks and also uh telephony and a little bit of commercials and whiteboard videos, but that's the stuff I mostly do in order to get paid. So yeah.
Okay. Now, I know that, you know, I think one of the hardest things to do when it comes to pursuing a career in art and, you know, creativity is making that transition and making that leap from being an amateur to being a professional, or at the very least someone who does it for hobby, just for shits and giggles, versus someone who's doing it for an actual job and a career.
Yep.
How do you, like, what would be the proper way to get into voice acting? Like, what are the actual first steps towards making a career, aka transitioning from unpaid to more paid work?
For one, if you're if you hate the sound of your own voice through a microphone, this might not be the job for you. I know there are plenty of people who are like, I hate listening to myself. You're gonna have to get used to it if you're gonna go over your own auditions.
Yeah.
Two, if you want to make sure this is a type of career path for you, or at least, you know, a side gig, you have to be pretty good at reading aloud while talking, because a lot of times, especially with animation jobs and some other stuff, you get the script the day you walk into the studio.
Oh,
Or if you're like me and you work from home, they want a 24 to 48 hour turnaround time. So you get the
damn.
script that day, and then they're like, okay, we want it at the end of the day. We'll pay you 40 extra bucks. I'm like, okay, I have to read about 500 words. Great. So
Damn.
yeah, but if you do it well, they'll rehire you. So yeah, and every voiceover job is completely different when it comes to pay, and it's one of those things that the market kind of figures out.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if it's one of those companies, especially with e-learning or corporate learning with, you know, um you know those corporate training videos. It's like, hi, welcome to this
Oh,
company,
yeah,
we're here to
yeah,
blah
yeah,
blah 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 blah.
yeah.
Yeah, those are professional voice actors too.
Uh-huh.
And you know, they're narrating the entire thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, voiceover is everywhere. That's why it's more accurate to call it voiceover than voice acting, even though I prefer the term voice acting. It's more accurate to
Mm.
call it voiceover because
Because
you
it's
are voicing
so
over.
it's so broad and it can be applied to so many different things.
Right. And people hear voiceover without even realizing it half the time. So yeah,
Yeah. Now,
because it's literally everywhere.
one of the coolest things about voice acting, like many arts, is just how adaptable and needed this skill is. And you're sort of talking about how many applications this has. From a marketing perspective, we hire voice actors, like you said, to read website copy or to do promo videos, or we need someone to go ahead and provide a voice for a commercial or a radio ad. What are some other types of industries and types of media that are always looking to hire voice actors?
Well, the anime industry, for one, for localizing uh like Japanese anime into English.
Mm-hmm.
Um, However, that also requires a slightly different skill set than your average voice acting gig,
How
because
so?
with your average voice acting gig, let's say let's say I had a line and then it was going to be animated, like everything you've heard, completely true. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, if I had to say that for an American animation, I'd say that line and then they would animate it afterward. However, this is animation coming from overseas. It's already animated, so
Mm-hmm.
you have to match lip flaps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So basically, let's say the lip flaps go, a certain speed. You have to match the speed of the lip flaps while acting at the same time. And you have a
Oh,
screen right in front of you, and you have to dub over that accurately. Otherwise, most English speaking audiences, they look at it. If the lip flaps don't match, it'll be like one of those old school, what do you call it? Hong
oh, it's like
Kong
those
films.
yeah,
Yeah,
like those kung fu
yeah,
films where it's like the
yeah.
dubbing is totally off.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And people notice that, especially English speaking audiences. So you have to match that. And most of the time, the voice actors, they get the script when they walk into the studio, and then they're like, okay, here's the scene. I'll let you watch it once. Okay, great. Now we're going to count down. Beep, beep, beep. I'm in the voice now. And that's all they get. Different skill set.
Damn.
So if you're really
Damn.
good at that, you can get a lot of money. And there's a huge dubbing industry in Texas because Funimation is based
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Whatchamacallit? So my brother-in-law, he actually went to a like a media tech school, and they were in contact with Funimation because I guess like some of the graduates who graduated from like audio engineering, they would go to Funimation. But yeah, I know that they're over here and they actually would hire.
Yeah, they're huge for anime, and it's really, really good for getting um, anime audiences to start paying attention to stuff here in the States,
Mm-hmm.
and because we're the biggest, consumers of media in the world. Um, but also other things that are also big for narration, whiteboard videos, as I said. They're usually it's people from other countries who make those whiteboard videos, and then when they're coming from China or India or other parts of or many parts of Africa,
Mm-hmm.
they want it to sound American because apparently the American accent sounds very, very professional.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a very it's a stereotype. It's weird.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you're doing whiteboard videos, they also want somebody who sounds normal.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, they don't want somebody who sounds like this all day, and they're going to sound like they're a 1930s announcer. But
Yeah, they don't want to like have like a character. They want it to be pretty neutral and
yeah, especially if you're working for voice acting and you're doing like American corporate jobs, they want somebody who sounds like they could be your next door neighbor.
mm-hmm.
Um, like if I'm talking about say Legos, for example, I would take a script, say, okay, I need to sound like a parent who's telling another parent of how proud I am of my kid, who's um being like who's really good at building stuff. And then I talk about how Legos help them cultivate that skill. I have to I have to take that script, and it's not just reading it off normally. I have to pretend I'm a parent and act like that to actually convey it toward other parents or other people who may want to buy Legos. And it's not something people think about when they think about voice acting. They're like, "Oh yeah, it's just they're just talking about Legos and they're advertising it." Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that's true, but they want it to be like a word of mouth without being word of mouth. And that's what most voice actors have to strive for.
Yeah, I think what's really fascinating about voice acting is as as a copywriter, I've worked on certain projects where I've had to write the copy that a voice actor would eventually read. And I know that also from my experience of writing scripts and making videos and stuff like that, you'll listen to something over again, and you can pinpoint certain moments in your voice where you're like, oh man, like I need to add a little bit more inflection to this, or like I need to change the tone of this to convey this part of the message. And so I can only imagine how difficult that is, especially when you have such a quick turnaround to be like, okay, I need to figure out this character, I need to embody this character, and then I need to sell it. Like, do you have to like, do you ever like slip into outfits, or like how do you like immerse yourself, especially if you're going from like different character to different character?
Oh man, I actually have a lot of practice from playing Dungeons and Dragons. A fun thing is a background in improvisation is really, really helpful. Not necessary, because I know I've met some voice actors who were terrible at improvisation, but it's a very useful skill. With Dungeons and Dragons, I basically role play, and I play as the dungeon master, who's pretty much in charge of the entire game, and I set up the story and narration. However, that also makes me, for the people who are playing the game, they're playing one character and one character only. I have to basically set up the world and all the other characters around them. So someday I might be like this, like some really gritty detective who hates life. And then after this, I happen to be someone who happens to be very, very flamboyant on the next day. And they could have a conversation with each other while I'm doing that. So I got a lot of practice. But a good way to practice voice acting without any equipment is literally just messing around, just doing voices in your car or in the shower or talking to yourself. If you have a significant other, they might think you're talking to them, but they'll be like, no, Raymond is talking. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's one of those skills that it's very easy to practice, and it's very easy to get better, and it's not that difficult to practice getting better. It's just working at it,
Well, I actually wanted to talk about practice, but first, let's go ahead and take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back.